Okay, here we go. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to session number 266 of Kevin Reed's A Course in Miracles. We are in the Manual for Teachers, and we are focusing on question number 17. How do God's teachers deal with magic thoughts? Okay, now we're going to speak a little more about magic thoughts. I have little notes written here in my book from, who knows, a couple of decades ago. It says, anything I do to make me feel better outside the mind. But I've thought about it during the week, and I could probably label, our magic thoughts are what we would call coping mechanisms. Coping mechanisms. Because it's labeled magic by Jesus if it's a solution that we look for outside of the mind. Because Jesus is always telling us there's only one problem. There's only one thing that needs to be coped with, right? And that is the belief that you separated from the oneness, right? That's Jesus talking to me, not me talking to you. All right, Jesus says, you guys believe you separated from the oneness. That's the problem, all right? And that problem can only be solved in the mind. But since we think we projected out of the mind to get away from an angry God, all right, where we miscreated this universe with our wonderful, powerful mind. All right? And now, once we split off from the right mind, we forgot that we're really still in the oneness. And we totally believe that we're here. And what we have to do while we're here is cope. Cope with things. All right? Every day. Every day. All right? And so that's what he means by anything you do to make yourself feel better, using things that are outside your mind. Okay? Those are magic thoughts. All right? I need to get this done. If I don't get this done, this will happen. All right? And it can be there's no order of difficulty, once again. Right? Magic thoughts are magic thoughts, okay? Whether it's the leader of some country thinking that, to make himself feel better, he needs to invade another country. Right? That's a magic thought. And what's going to be said here, talking about those things, and it's going to be focusing on my response to those things. Okay. Like, suppose you're in a hurry and you're trying to get past me on the street and you're not really paying attention. You knock into me. Right? And in my present condition, I feel a little unsteady. All right? Then it's all up to me how I react to that. Right? And he's going to tell me if I react with anger to any of these magic thoughts, it's because I was reminded on a very deep level, I was reminded of my own belief that I usurped the power of heaven, that I turned my back on the oneness. In other words, I sinned, I separated. On a very deep level, it's reminding me of that. because I'm accusing you of being guilty. You're guilty of something. You bumped into me, right? You stood in the doorway of the bus as I was trying to get off. What is wrong with you? All right, and so we project that guilt, and that's what makes the world go round. Okay, and then in the end, we'll see that the only way to deal with that is to realize you're doing it, and then you come back into the mind. You commune with your inner guide. Right? In the Course, we call it the Holy Spirit. We call it Jesus. Right? You contact and just announce your willingness to be corrected, your desire to see correction, your desire to see peacefully and to experience peace. And that, in a nutshell, is what's going to be said here, although it's going to be said so poetically. All right? Okay, just one little sip of liquid. And last week's problem with the heater, all right, that was connected directly to Hades, that wouldn't stop, has been fixed magically. The magical solution was to call maintenance and get them to remember that I need attention on the day that the heater man comes in. Well done. Okay, number 266, how do God's teachers deal with magic thoughts? This is a crucial question for both teacher and pupil. If this issue is mishandled, the teacher of God has hurt himself and has also attacked his pupil. This strengthens fear and makes the magic seem quite real to both of them. How to deal with magic thus becomes a major lesson for the teacher of God to master. His first responsibility in this is not to attack. If a magic thought arouses anger in any form, God's teacher can be sure that he is strengthening his own belief in sin and has condemned himself. He can be sure as well that he has asked for depression, pain, fear, and disaster to come to him. Let him remember then, it is not this that he would teach, because it is not this that he would learn. All right? And remember that teaching is demonstrating. So if, I go off on the couple who are blocking the exit of the bus, then I am demonstrating my belief that I am separated from the oneness. I'm here on my own, and I got to get mine. I got to take care of myself. Right? And you trying to take care of yourself is impinging on that. So, it just pops up every day, in every way. Right? So he says it's a crucial question. How do I deal with magic thoughts? How do I deal with your coping mechanisms? Right? No matter what it is. And remember, there's no order of difficulty, but when we're here in the ego thought system, we have that first tendency is to believe some things are more egregious than others. Okay? So he says this is a crucial question. And he says, and if the issue is mishandled, right, you're going to hurt yourself and the person that's in front of you, or the person you think is doing this to you. And he goes, and if you interpret things wrongly, he says, this strengthens fear and makes the magic seem quite real to both of you. Right? So how to deal with magic becomes a major lesson for the teacher of God to master. And this is his first responsibility in this, is not to attack it. And sometimes that attack is, it's like reflex. It's like a reflex. You stepped on my toe. You know, that toe's been hurting me for years. You stepped on my toe, and it's automatically, what are you doing? As the anger rises. Okay? It's on a very deep level. This is why this is a very psychological spirituality. Owing a great debt to Sigmund Freud for speaking about the unconscious, right? And making the unconscious conscious. Until we become aware that, oh yeah, this is what it is. All right, his first responsibility is not to attack. All right, and I have a little side note in here that just says, be kind. Be kind. And in my lifetime, I can say that's easier said than done. Easier said than done. Besides being mostly Irish, I'm Aries, so I have that bellicose nature, let's say, or bellicose tendencies. Okay. So if a magic thought arouses anger in any form, God's teacher can be sure that he is strengthening his own belief in sin. All right? So if I get angry, I can be assured that I'm just reinforcing my own belief in the separation. Okay? And because I believe in the separation, it's, you know, my body is the hero, is the central part of it. Right? And I'm strengthening my own belief in separation. And I have therefore condemned myself. All right? If I've condemned myself, I'm guilty. All right? I believe I separated, now I'm guilty. And it happens so quickly. So quickly. This is why Jesus always urges us to look. Right? Be vigilant. Be vigilant. When he says be vigilant for God's kingdom, he's talking about be vigilant for when the ego is pounding on that kingdom. When the ego is calling you to respond. Just be vigilant. And when we become vigilant during the day, which is a practice, an ardent practice, you'll see that things become a little easier. We become used to coming into the right mind quickly, where our inner guide will help us to see correctly. By reminding us we're not separated from the oneness. If I'm not separated from the oneness, I am at peace. I can be kind because I know I'm at peace. Nothing can threaten me. I'm so sure of that. All right? That's why we walk about in joy. Right? with that awareness. And by coming into the right mind and asking that inner guide, right, help me to see correctly. I'm willing. Right? That inner guide will offer us the entirety of heaven, right? The peace that passes all understanding. And what happens is we take as much as we can at the moment and bring that back with us into Dante's Inferno here, where we don't have to abandon all hope, right? Because the hope lies in realizing you have a mind, and there can be corrections made there, all right? So he says, look, if you get angry, he says you can be sure that you're strengthening your own belief in separation, and you can have condemned yourself, you know, because what comes with that, with the belief in the separation, is depression, pain, fear, and disaster. A preview of what's to come. But it doesn't have to be that way. Okay? But you'll see that it is when we choose to believe that we're separated from the oneness. And we choose to believe that who's ever in charge is angry and they're trying to get us. Right? I want to speak to the manager. Oh, no, you don't. She's really pissed. Okay. All right. So let the teacher remember then. It's not this that he would teach, because it's not this that he would learn. So it's not separation that I would demonstrate by getting all up into your face, as they say. Right? I don't want to try to be hip by saying grill, but, you know, you start getting angry. That's a demonstration of separation. I believe I'm separated. And that anger is only disguising fear. Okay. Another glimpse into the psychology of the Course. So let him remember that it's not this that he would teach, because it's not this that he would learn. Remember, giving and receiving are simultaneous. Teaching and learning are simultaneous. All right, so just be vigilant. I mean, after a while, you get tired of being angry. I remember I said it once to the first dear teacher that I ever had with the Course in Miracles, Emily Andrews, like 1990 or something like that, 91. And she was a wonderful spiritual counselor. At one point, I said to her, Emily, I don't know what's wrong. I said, I'm angry. I said, but logically, I tell myself, it can't be everybody, because I felt angry at everybody. Everybody. It didn't matter. And I now know this was a fear response. But you gain those awarenesses as you work with your higher power, as they say in the 12 steps, with your inner guide, as we say in the Course. You are willing to see correctly. You're willing to see the correction. And that really means that we're willing to have a peek at our own innocence, as much as we can handle, until we can handle the whole thing. Right? And Jesus knows that sometimes that the idea of approaching the truth about yourself, sometimes it's scary. Most times it's scary. So we do it little by little. That's why it's taken me from 1990 to now to have changes in perception. Right? It's a process. Time is an illusion. Right? And Jesus says, just up to you when you choose to see who you really are. Right? Paragraph 2. There is, however, a temptation to respond to magic in a way that reinforces it. Nor is this always obvious. It can, in fact, be easily concealed by a wish to help. It is this double wish that makes the help of little value and must lead to undesired outcomes. Nor should it be forgotten that the outcome that results will always come to teacher and pupil alike. How many times has it been emphasized that you give but to yourself? And where could this be better shown than in the kinds of help the teacher of God gives to those who need his aid? Here is his gift most clearly given him. For he will give only what he has chosen for himself. And in this gift, his judgment upon the Holy, and in this gift is his judgment upon the Holy Son of God. Sometimes we think we're doing the right thing, as they say. We're helping this person. You know, for an example, somebody says, you know, my spouse of 40 years, they've been horrible for 40 years. And now they're getting worse. And yet they need help physically, right? I have to help him put his socks on, or I have to remind him to take his medicine. I have to take him to the doctor for his eye test. All these things, whatever it is, you know, but I'm helping, right? So he says, you have to watch out for this, because that help could be masking the hatred. Right? And as you're, quote unquote, helping, you're despising this person at the same time. And he says, and remember, what you give to them, you give to yourself. Because as Dr. Wapnick would say with a wry smile, remember, there's no one out there. We are projecting everything, right? But you don't, just keep that in the back of your mind. The way to get to that realization and not be frightened by it is to realize that, yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm like forcing myself to act nice. You know, I feel sorry for them. What is he going to do if I'm not doing it for him? What is he going to do? You know? So, how many times has it been emphasized that you give but to yourself? Right? And where could this be better shown than in the kinds of help the teacher of God gives to those who need his aid? Here is his gift most clearly given him, for he will give only what he has chosen for himself. Right? If I feel guilty because I'm not helping this person that's been my spouse for 40 years, you know, or it's been my family member, all right, Right? Remember, there's so much weight on these words, mother, father, sister, brother. Right? There's so much psychological weight put on those things, on those names, right? That I might feel obliged, which means I will feel guilty if I don't help. So what I've chosen for myself is basically guilt. And that's basically what I'm giving, right? Although it's disguised as helping, right? And I have a little side note written here too, which it's always better to come inside first, okay? Come into your mind very quickly, you could do it, and ask Jesus, you know, how can I be kind? How can I be kind? All right? How can I be kind without, you know, that underground river of rage, right? Remembering everything this person has done to me, right? As I, you know, hand them his eye drops or something, you know? Come inside is always the answer, right? Because Jesus is not going to give you specifics what to do in this situation. What to do in this situation always is to come inside and be willing to shown the peace, be willing to be shown the peaceful path. What is the peaceful path? And that would, if I'm holding grudges against somebody, that would involve forgiveness. It always involves forgiveness. Being willing to drop my judgments and see the truth about the other. That's how I deal with magic thoughts. By being willing to see the truth about the other. And put down all my history, all my past thoughts about them, all the slights and the whatevers, you know, all the things they've done to me. And now I feel obliged to help. All right? Come inside. Whenever you're urged, whenever you have the urge to help, is this the right thing? Show me how to be kind. That's all. Because it's not the form, it's the content. If the content of my mind is love, whatever I do or say will transmit that. It will be coming from a foundation of love. All right? So just be vigilant for your own motives, because there is a temptation to respond to magic in a way that reinforces it. Right? And it's not always obvious. Right? And what's coming up for you right now is one of the things is don't start blaming yourself for anything. Right? That only halts the progress. Right? As Dr. Wapnick would say, sufficient for the day is the guilt thereof. Right? Paraphrasing some Shakespearean thing, right? We walk around with enough guilt. Don't pile it on yourself. All right? Nor should it be forgotten the outcome that will result will always come to teacher and pupil. Paragraph 3. It is easiest to let error be corrected where it is most apparent. And errors can be corrected, can be recognized by their results. A lesson truly taught can lead to nothing but release for teacher and pupil who have shared in one intent. Attack can enter only if perception of separate goals has entered. And this must indeed have been the case if the result is anything but joy. The single aim of the teacher turns the divided goal of the pupil into one direction, with the call for help becoming his one appeal. This, then, is easily responded to with just one answer, and this answer will enter the teacher's mind unfailingly, from where it shines into his pupil's mind, making it one with his. Right? So it's easiest to let the error be corrected where it is most apparent. And errors can be recognized by their results. So if I'm helping, right, and in the back of my mind, I got that, like, I wish I didn't have to do this. I can't wait till this is over, And maybe the thoughts are not that obvious, but sooner or later, they'll break out, all right? And so the error, which is believing I'm separated from God, is recognized by the result, right? My use of magic, unbeknownst to me, will be noticed by its result. The result is that I'm angry, I'm upset, I feel resentment, and memories of the past are coming up to enrage me, and so that's the results, and so the error can be recognized that way. Say, oh, look, I'm getting all bent out of shape. I must have chosen the wrong teacher. But he says a lesson truly taught can lead to nothing but release for both the teacher and the pupil, the person that I'm interacting with. Right? A lesson truly taught. Right? And that the lesson truly taught is going to the right mind and being willing to see the truth, being willing to see the innocence. Right? And from there you can move. Do what you got to do, as they say. All right? Attack can enter only if perception of separate goals has entered. He keeps repeating these ideas. All right? So my anger, which is an attack, all right, my seeing the other as separate, all right, is an attack. And that can only enter, all right, if perception of separate goals has entered. And that begins with the belief in separation from the oneness. Now we're all separate. And we're all, everybody's got to get what they got to get. They got to get what they need. Right? It's me or you. So that's when attack enters. And he says, he says, be assured that this is the case, that you believe you're separated from God, and now you believe in separate interests. Right? And he says this must indeed be the case if the result is anything but joy. If anything but joy is arising from whatever I'm engaged in, all right, then he says, somewhere along the line, the belief in separation snuck in. Okay? The single aim of the teacher turns the divided goal of the pupil into one direction. Right? With the call for help becoming his one appeal. All right, so the aim of the teacher turns the divided goal of the pupil. All right? Whoever's standing in front of me, if they're believing in their magic thoughts, my answer is to go to the one mind. Right? The single aim turns the divided goal of the pupil into one direction. All right? We bring the mind in alignment with the one mind. And we do that simply by being willing to see the truth. Right? There's not that complicated. All right? Jesus says in a couple of places, this is easy. Oh no, he says it's simple. Let's not get that wrong. It's simple, but it ain't easy. All right? It takes that vigilance, that dedication, that desire to see the truth. Right? So the single aim of the teacher, which is, I desire the truth, right? This turns the divided goal of the pupil in one direction, with the call for help becoming his one appeal. Right? So the other is calling for help. Right? No matter how nasty I've been to you, I need your help. Could you help me, please? That's the call. Right? That's the call that says, I believe I'm here all on my own. I believe I'm separated from the oneness. Right? I believe I'm lacking love. So when we have gone to our right mind, our response is love, in whatever form it will take. You will get that idea of what form the love will take. How can I be helpful? Right? How can I be kind? Right? Because there's only two things this pupil can be doing. They can be offering love or calling for love. And in either case, the teacher of God responds with love. Because I have gone to the mind where the fountain of love resides. All right? And I bring it with me. It comes through me. Okay? And it alights on the situation. All right? So, in doing that, this then is easily responded to with just one answer: love. And this answer will enter the teacher's mind unfailingly, if that's my desire. Help me to see love. Help me to see the truth. From there, it shines into his pupil's mind, making it one with his. All right? And it doesn't mean a change in form of the other, the pupil. It just means that it's in the bank for them, waiting. Right? That realization of oneness is waiting for them. Right? And it's actually been reinforced in their mind. Okay? It'll pop up soon. Right? Paragraph 4. Perhaps it is helpful to remember that no one can be angry at a fact. It is always an interpretation that gives rise to negative emotions, regardless of their seeming justification by what appears as facts. Regardless, too, of the intensity of the anger that is aroused. It may be merely slight irritation, perhaps too mild to be even clearly recognized, or it may also take the form of intense rage, accompanied by thoughts of violence, fantasized or apparently acted out. It does not matter. All of these reactions are the same. They obscure the truth, and this can never be a matter of degree. Either truth is apparent or it is not. It cannot be partially recognized. Who is unaware of truth must look upon illusions. All right? So he says it's helpful to remember. Oh, he says perhaps. All right. Perhaps it's helpful to remember that you don't get angry at a fact. The fact is that as you're hurrying by, you shook my balance. You bumped into me. How I react, all right, is up to me. My interpretation of that, all right? So if all of a sudden negative emotions have arisen, it's because I've interpreted it through the eyes of separation. Okay? And regardless of their seeming justification by what appears as facts, right? I can, some of these facts can appear to be very egregious, very frightening. Somebody invading another country, somebody dropping a bomb, somebody hurting children, somebody killing and mutilating people, somebody raping, all these things seem very egregious. And he says it might be a slight irritation, or it may be a form of intense rage, whatever my reaction is. He says it's all coming from the same place, the belief in separation. All of these reactions are the same, he says. Just that, whether it's, or it's intense rage. Right? Because that reaction, whether it's just, yeah, right, yeah, sure, or what do you think you're doing? Or that intense fury of seeing somebody's incredibly egregious actions, their ways of coping with the world. Right? I've chosen to see through the eyes of the ego. Right? Therefore, the truth is obscured. It doesn't matter whether it's a slight annoyance or intense fury. The truth has been obscured. Once the truth is obscured, it's obscured. And both of those things obscure the truth. Slight annoyance, intense fury. They obscure the truth. And this can never be a matter of degree. All right, so one way or the other, you've forgotten the oneness. You've forgotten your own innocence. You're believing in your own guilt. All right? Either truth is apparent or it is not. It cannot be partially recognized. Who is unaware of truth, right? So whoever is unaware of truth must look on illusions. So if I'm cut myself off, I'm unaware of the truth of who I am, right, then I must look upon illusions and believe them. Paragraph 5. Anger in response to perceived magic thoughts is a basic cause of fear. Consider what this reaction means, and its centrality in the world's thought system becomes apparent. A magic thought, by its mere presence, acknowledges a separation from God. It states, in the clearest form possible, that the mind which believes it has a separate will that can oppose the will of God also believes that it can succeed. That this can hardly be a fact is obvious. Yet it can be believed as a fact, yet that it can be believed as a fact is equally obvious. And herein lies the birthplace of guilt. Who usurps the place of God and takes it for himself now has a deadly enemy. And he must stand alone in his protection and make himself a shield to keep him safe from fury that can never be abated, and vengeance that can never be satisfied. Okay. So the mind which believes it has separate will that can oppose God also believes that it can succeed. And because we believe we succeeded in opposing the will of God, which is your total innocence, your total oneness, the fact that you are not an individual, so we oppose that thought. All right. All right. Let's see. All right. It states in the clearest form that the mind which believes it has a separate will that can oppose the will of God also believes it can succeed. He says, this can hardly be a fact. He says, you can't do that. He says that this can hardly be a fact is obvious, yet that it can be believed as fact is also obvious because we believe it. Here it is. Here's the world. All right? And herein lies the birthplace of guilt, because I believe I have succeeded in usurping the throne of God. I have taken over. And I automatically feel guilty about that. Oh, damn. I ruined the oneness. The ego would tell me I've killed God. It destroyed heaven. All right? The birthplace of guilt. Now I need a shield. All right? And herein lies the birthplace. Who usurps the place of God and takes it for himself now has a deadly enemy. It's like, oh my God, now God is going to pop back up like Freddy Krueger or something, and he's coming to get me for what I did. I believe I usurped his power. Now he's going to come get it back. All right? So I must believe now I have a deadly enemy. And I stand alone to protect myself. And I have to make myself a shield to keep me safe from the fury that can never be abated, all right? And the vengeance that can never be satisfied. Now I have to make a shield, and that shield is the world, the universe. That's my shield. I can run and hide, and if he shows up and he goes, Kevin, I said, wait, it wasn't me. I can always project the guilt. That's what the birthplace of guilt. And the idea of projecting it now, because the ego tells me the way to get rid of it is to throw it on somebody else. Right? The old hot potato. All right? And he must make himself a shield to keep him safe from the fury that can never be abated. God will never stop. He's relentless. He's going to get you. That's what the ego tells us. And it's reinforced in all the, the Old Testament God is just that. It's that fury that can never be abated. And that vengeance that can never be satisfied. You're going to get smoted somehow. So he says, paragraph 6, how can this unfair battle be resolved? Its ending is inevitable, for its outcome must be death. How then can one believe in one's defenses? All right. How can you believe in your own defenses when the outcome is going to be death? Everybody's going to die. All right. That's how we think God gets us back. All right. He says, how then can one believe in one's defenses? And he says in sentence 4, magic again must help. Forget the battle. Accept it as a fact and then forget it. Right? That's Freud's idea of repression. Just push it down. Forget it. Forget about it. That's magic. That's a magic way to cope with the guilt. Just push it down. Forget the battle. Accept it as a fact and then forget it. Do not remember the impossible odds against you. Do not remember the immensity of the enemy. Do not remember the immensity of God who's coming to get you. Not in truth, but in the ego thought system. When we believe we separated from God. And do not think about your frailty in comparison. All right? Don't think about how weak you are in comparison to God. Even though you thought you were pretty strong to say, I'll do it myself. Accept your, sentence 9, accept your separation, but do not remember how it came about. All right? Which is basically what we do. We wander around mindlessly. All right? Accept your separation, but do not remember how it came about. Believe that you have won it, but do not retain the slightest memory of who your great opponent really is. Projecting your forgetting onto him. It seems to you he has forgotten too. All right? So somebody once said to me, that's how Irish family handle grudges. They just repress it. Just forget about it. And you think that the other person's eventually forgotten about it too. All right? But that's what he's saying here. Accept your separation, but do not remember how it came about. He says, believe you have won it, but do not retain the slightest memory of who your great opponent really is. Projecting your forgetting onto him. So he forgot about it too. It seems to you he has forgotten too. All right? But he says, so, you've repressed it. You've repressed the guilt. All right? You forget about it. Paragraph 7. But what now will be your reaction to all magic thoughts? So how am I going to react now to everybody else's coping mechanisms? Right? Because they're all doing the same thing. They've repressed the belief in separation. They've repressed the guilt. And now they're just trying to cope. Because the truth has been obscured. And they believe they're here. And now you got to do what you got to do, as they say. But what now will be your reaction to all magic thoughts? So what now will be your reaction to everybody doing what they got to do? All right? They can but awaken sleeping guilt, which you have hidden but have not let go. Each one says clearly to your frightened mind, you have usurped the place of God. Think not he has forgotten. Here we have the fear of God most starkly represented. For in that thought has guilt already raised madness to the throne of God himself. And now there is no hope, except to kill. Here is salvation now. An angry father pursues his guilty son. Kill or be killed, for here alone is choice. Beyond this, there is none. For what was done cannot be done without. The stain of blood can never be removed, and anyone who bears the stain on him must meet with death. All right, just like Lady Macbeth can't get the stain of blood off her hands. All right? And this is, another way of describing the biblical God. So we're watching everybody cope, and sometimes they're coping is interpreted by me as, hey, you're doing something to me. You're infringing on my space. Whatever it is. Doesn't matter, big or small infringement. All right? But what that does, it awakens quickly, it awakens the fact that I believe I'm separated from God. I believe I usurped the throne of God, and I feel guilty about it. So it awakens that sleeping guilt, right, which you have hidden, but you haven't let it go, right? And each one that we see coping, each one says clearly to your frightened mind, you have usurped the place of God. Think not he has forgotten. And those fearful memories of his vengeance start to rise up. Oh my God. Even though they're not clear, there's that free-floating fear, which, mutes into anger. Right? Here we have the fear of God most starkly represented. For in that thought has guilt raised madness to the throne of God himself. Right? Now we think God is just as crazy as we are. He's going to come and get me. Right? This is the biblical God. All right? Look out, kid, it's something you did. God knows when, but you're doing it again. God's going to get you. Don't do this. Don't look back. Don't do that. So in that thought of guilt, he says, don't think God forgot about it. He says, in that thought, madness is raised to the throne of God himself. So we see God as being just as crazy as we are. And to me, that's the mindset that produced the Old Testament. It was through the ego lens that God was looked at and spoken about and written about. It's always, step out of line. The man come and take you away. And now there is no hope except to join the fray, except to kill. So this is salvation now. Kill before you're killed. An angry father pursues his guilty son. Kill or be killed, for here alone is choice. All right? Beyond this, there is none. For what was done cannot be undone, or cannot be done without. The stain of blood can never be removed, and anyone who bears the stain on him must meet with death. That's the belief in the ego thought system. So if I'm reacting angrily to the way people conduct themselves, right, in the illusion, then this is all the thoughts that have been resurrected in mine, although I've tried to repress them. Right? You're guilty. And you're going to get punished. Now I've already projected it onto them. Right? So this presents a pretty harsh situation, hopeless. But he says in paragraph 8, into this hopeless situation, God sends his teachers. They bring the light of hope from God himself. There is a way in which escape is possible. It can be learned and taught, but it requires patience and abundant willingness. Given that, the lesson's manifest simplicity stands out like an intense white light against the black horizon, for such it is. If anger comes from an interpretation and not a fact, it is never justified. He says that in another section in the Course too. Anger is never justified. Right? If anger comes from an interpretation and not a fact, it is never justified. Once this is even dimly grasped, the way is open. Now it is possible to take the next step. The interpretation can be changed at last. Magic thoughts need not lead to condemnation, for they do not really have the power to give rise to guilt. And so they can be overlooked and thus forgotten in the truest sense. Right? So magic thoughts really don't have any power, right, to give rise to guilt. And so they can be overlooked. And he's not talking about ignoring them. He's talking about looking past them. Looking past the magic thoughts to the truth. Right? And thus the magic thought is forgotten in the truest sense. Okay? So into this hopeless situation, God sends his teachers. That's just a metaphor. God don't send anybody. He doesn't move people around. And those who want to demonstrate the oneness, they bring the light of hope from God himself, because you've gone into the spot in your mind that remembers your union with God and remembers who you are. Right? And you bring that memory with you, and you demonstrate, your life demonstrates that that's your awareness. Right? And so into that hopeless situation, you come in. All right? There is a way in which escape is possible. There is a way in which escape from illusion and magic thoughts is possible. It can be learned and taught. Right? And here's the part of the process. It requires patience. And that means patience with yourself also. Right? Patience and abundant willingness. You have to keep applying that willingness to see the truth. He says, given that, the lesson's manifest simplicity stands out like an intense white light against the black horizon, for such it is. All right, that's what he's telling us. The lesson is really simple. You're not separated from God, but it takes patience and abundant willingness to get to that realization. And once you get to that realization, it stands out like an intense white light against the black background. Okay? If anger comes from an interpretation, sentence 6, paragraph 8, if anger comes from an interpretation and not a fact, it is never justified. Right? And you might think, well, yeah. He says, once this is dimly grasped, the way is open. Right? Once this is just even dimly grasped, the way is open. Now it is possible to take the next step. And that next step is the interpretation can be changed at last. You almost knocked me over, but my interpretation can be changed. My interpretation can be changed. Right? Once I remind myself that my anger is not justified. Right? Help me. I'm only justifying my anger because I believe I'm separated. So I can quickly notice, oh wait, I'm really annoyed. Right? And I can come inside to my internal guide and the interpretation can be changed at last. Right? Magic thoughts need not lead to condemnation. Right? I don't need to condemn you and thereby reinforce my own condemnation, for they do not really have the power to give rise to guilt. All right? So whatever your coping mechanism is, it really doesn't have the power to give rise to guilt, to my guilt, right? Because I can reinterpret what I think is happening, or I can have it reinterpreted by going into the mind where the memory of love resides forever, the memory of who I am. Right? Magic thoughts need not lead to condemnation, for they do not really have the power to give rise to guilt, and so they can be overlooked and thus forgotten in the truest sense. And remember, when he says overlooked, he's meaning we look past whatever's going on to the truth. I'm willing to see the truth. I'm willing to have my interpretation corrected. Right? And in that way, it's corrected forever. It's corrected in the truest sense. All right? It's forgotten in the truest sense. All right? And you'll see, as you apply these techniques, or this technique, of going to the right mind and being willing, right? Having that abundant willingness, which suggests it's an everyday thing here. It's a moment-to-moment thing here. Patience and abundant willingness. But just the willingness to become aware of peace, that's a great incentive. And you'll see it comes. As much as you want. As much as you can handle. All right? Paragraph 9. Madness, but seems terrible. In truth, it has no power to make anything. Like the magic which becomes its servant, it neither attacks nor protects. It neither attacks nor protects. To see it and to recognize its thought system is to look on nothing. Can nothing give rise to anger? Hardly so. Remember then, teacher of God, that anger recognizes a reality that is not there. Yet is the anger certain witness that you do believe it as a fact. Now is escape impossible until you see you have responded to your own interpretation, which you have projected on an outside world. Let this grim sword be taken from you now. There is no death. This sword does not exist. The fear of God is causeless. But his love is cause for everything beyond all fear, and thus forever real and always true. Okay? So he says, remember then, teacher of God, that anger recognizes a reality that is not there. All right? Yet is the anger certain witness that you believe it as a fact. So I believe this reality is there. All right? He says, now escape is impossible until you see you have responded to your own interpretation. I'm interpreting the world. I see something and I give it all the meaning it has. All right? And he says you projected that onto the world. So he says, let this grim sword be taken from you now. Let this sword of judgment be taken from you now. All right? Come into your inner guide. All right? And just ask. tell him or her, I'm willing to see the truth. I'm willing to have my interpretation corrected. Okay. So let this grim sword be taken from you now. Let this grim sword of judgment be taken from you. He says, there is no death. There is no death. This sword does not exist. The fear of God is causeless. Let that sink in. The fear of God is causeless. But his love, God's love, is the cause of everything beyond all fear, and thus forever real and always true. So, once again, when we notice how we're reacting, the idea is to notice the ego and acknowledge you don't want it, and come inside and ask for the correction. All right? Ask Jesus for help. Help me to see correctly. All right? Because his love, God's love, is the cause of everything. It's the cause of everything beyond fear. There is no fear in that presence. And his love is forever real and always true. All right. So we deal with magic thoughts by having them reinterpreted. All righty then. Thank you for the opportunity, and I will see you in the next session, okay?